When a little boy becomes temperamental, Mommy, I don't want to. Everyone just figures he's going through the terrible twos. But is it possible that there's a paranormal reason why this kid just can't relax? And then we take a look at the story of a house, a seemingly ordinary house in a seemingly ordinary neighborhood. But little do the residents know that this house holds a secret that'll blow your mind. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are ready for this heat wave. It's coming up. I'm looking at the weather report. It's going to be like 100 something in Hood River, where I live, Hood River, Oregon. People are going to be falling, dropping like flies left and right. I hope not, right? I'm built for it. I'm from California. I've done 100-degree weather standing on my head. But someone who doesn't care how hot it is, someone who looks at the sun and says, "Bring it on, baby." Walking into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for our newest Patreon supporter, Colin Sills. Woohoo, yeah, wee! Haha, yeah, he's all walking on in a little tank top. He's ready for the heat wave. Colin, you're going to be our captain or pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon, I totally understand. I really, really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Colin, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you. What's our coolest? It's Jason Jalopy. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys of the Jason Jalopy. It's a convertible. Get that fresh summer breeze in. Everyone climb on board this Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car as Colin fires it up and takes us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Go ahead and drive us out to a little boy's house. Nice leisurely drive to this random neighborhood. We don't have the exact location for this story. We don't have any names either. Or time period. I know some of you guys are like, Jason, you keep doing these stories that are really hard to verify. And it's just the nature of this type of work. It's just the nature of paranormal research. You don't get a lot of information sometimes. But I love these stories nonetheless. We're about to meet this family. First off, we're going to meet the dad. Let's call him Cole. And he's the father of a 2-year-old boy who we'll call Sam. An interesting story. I got some hot takes on this one. Let's take a look. So recently, and when I say recent, like this year, 2024, Sam has started talking about ghosts. I'm really tempted to do my little kid voice. I just about to start it. I know some of you guys drives you nuts, and like indulge me a little bit. Daddy, there's a ghost. There's a ghost in the corner. Dad's like, what? Huh? Sam, you see a ghost? Yeah, Daddy. He's over there. Cole's like, point to him. Point to where the ghost is. So Sam's like, right there. Because obviously Cole can't see the ghost. I guess I should say that. It's not like he looks over and he sees Casper floating there and he's like, huh? What? He doesn't see anything. Sam keeps going, ghost, Daddy, ghost. And Cole will say, where's he at? Where's the ghost at? And Sam will just raise his finger and point towards an empty corner of the room. Ghost, Daddy. Ghost. And that started off in early 2024. He's seeing this stuff, but by April 2024, things are starting to escalate. Sam is sleeping in bed with his parents. So Cole and the mom and little Sam is in the middle of them. And he'd be laying there as everyone's starting to go to sleep. He'd be laying there and he goes, "Stop poking me. Stop it. Stop poking me." And Cole's like, "I'm not poking you." And the mom's like, "I'm not poking you either." And he goes, "But somebody is. He's poking me. It's the ghost." It's the ghost. He's all Cole's peeing his pants. He's like, "Oh no, the ghost is in the bedroom too." Ah! Super scared. Dude, listen, kids are cool, I guess, but the idea of having... Like, I have already had enough encounters with ghosts, right? It's can be disturbing a lot of the times. Not all the time. But at least I'm seeing them. I think I'd be much more off-put if I was, like, waking up in the morning and drinking my morning Diet Pepsi, and this little kid, my little kid, if I had a kid, walks in the room, and he goes, "Daddy, the ghost is in your drink." Well, I'm throwing drinks away. The kid's pulling pranks on me. He's like, "Daddy, the ghost is in your wallet. Give it to me." I'm like, "Here you go, son. Here you go. Get rid of the ghosts." It would be more off-putting if I couldn't see the ghost, and someone else is like, "He's over there." You know, I'd probably be like looking up adoption agencies online. I was like, "Can I trade my kid in for a non-ghost scene kid?" Unless I could see it too, and then we'd be like a father-son ghost team. But anyways, so he's laying in bed, he's like, I'm gonna stop doing the little kid voice. The little Sam boy goes, "He's poking me. Something keeps poking me, Daddy." And he would plead. Sam would go, "Stop poking me, stop poking me." And you'd just be sitting there next to this kid. He's like, he's all freaking out. He's like, I'm getting poked. I'm getting poked in the eyeballs. And then sometimes he would go, "Not on the ground anymore." And I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't even make sense. At least when you were being poked, I understood what was going on. Every so often when Sam was laying in bed with them, he'd go, "Not on the ground anymore." And then he would look up at the ceiling. And you're like, "Oh, dude, so the ghost is floating." Well, nighty-night, son. You roll over. Take the bed sheets off of him. No hiding from the spirits of the damned. So sometimes he would notice that this ghost would start floating around the room. During the day, so that's at night. That's when he's trying to go to bed. During the day, Sam would be... It's so funny. I love this story. I do have some hot takes on it, though. But in the morning, or really during the day, Cole would be sitting there drinking his coffee, reading the newspaper, and Sam would come into the living room and he'd be rubbing his eyes. He's like, "Oh man, I didn't get any sleep last night. I couldn't sleep. I kept getting poked. And this guy's flying around the bedroom. It's really hard to sleep. And there's a guy flying around." And Cole, Sam's dad, would go, "Well, Sam, why don't you tell me about the ghost? Why don't you tell me a little bit about the ghost? I know it likes poking you and it can fly around, but is it a boy or a girl?" And Cole would just sit there and he'd look at his dad and go, "I don't want to talk about it." "Well, Sam, okay, is it friendly? Is it a good ghost? When it's poking you, is it doing it because it's I don't want to talk about it," Sam would say. Pretty much any time Cole tried asking him specific questions about this ghost, Sam's response was the same. "I don't want to talk about it." He's rubbing his eyes. "I don't want to talk about it, Daddy." He's acting very irritable during the day because he can't get any sleep at night. One day, Cole brings a piece of paper and a pencil over, probably a crayon because he's a little kid, but gives him a writing implement and goes, Sam, can you draw Daddy a picture of the ghost?" And Sam just sits there and goes, "I don't want to talk about it." Which would also mean I don't want to draw about it either. That would take more time. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about the ghost anymore. But then at night, he's getting poked and he's being kept up. And the next day, he's all irritable. This little 2-year-old cannot get any sleep. And Cole keeps going, "Well, so the ghost was keeping you up again last night?" "I don't want to talk about it, Dad. I want to talk about the ghost." One day, Cole said he went to his office for work, which I'm assuming is like a work from home, like he has an office in his house because he's kind of in the area. Well, one day, Cole, he goes to his office to work, and it's just Mom and Sam now. And Mom said that when she went to go put Sam in the high chair so she could feed him, he starts freaking out. No, no! And he's kicking his little legs. He's moving his little arms. No, Mommy, no, no! He won't let her put him in the high chair, and the reason why is he keeps going, there's something underneath it! There's something underneath the high chair! Needless to say, you look down, there's nothing there. To Mom and Dad, they don't see anything underneath the high chair, but he refuses to get in it because there's something underneath it. I can think of very few situations which would be more disconcerting than to be trapped in a high elevated chair that I'm locked into with my big baby legs dangling over the side, and I know there's something underneath. When things go south, I can't get out of this chair. It's designed for a kid to be stuck in it. And knowing there's something under there, he doesn't even specifically say it's the ghost. So is there some other force in this house? Cole says it's really interesting because Sam, the word he used was tethered. Cole said that when him and Sam, or when the family goes out, when they leave the house, he goes, Cole has lots of fun. Just like any kid would have fun hanging out. But he goes, it only lasts for a period of time. We're having fun, and then he starts to get really somber. And he's like, let's just go home. I want to go home. Can we go home? And you go, well, that's pretty typical of kids, right? They get bored super easily. Yeah, maybe. He thinks that when he's removed from the house, this is what Cole thinks. Cole thinks that when Sam is removed from the house, he's removed from this hostile, which at this point there's no other way to put it, because it's definitely scaring him and disrupting his sleep cycle. That's my word, actually, using hostile. We'll get to that in a second, but when you remove Sam from the house, when you move Sam from this paranormal presence, he has fun. But then this is why Cole says it's almost like he's tethered back to the home. It's like the spirits are calling him back home. Like, now you got to come back. He's at the zoo. He's like, oh, I really want to see the Tasmanian devil. But before he gets to that exhibit, he's like, oh, man, here's the ghostly call of home. He's like, let's just go home. I'll see the Tasmanian devil some other time. Now, we've covered something like this before. I'm not done with the story, but I do want to segue into this. We've covered something like this before, and I actually did a presentation on this at the Oregon Ghost Conference. It's Why Are Ghosts Scary? We covered a story like this before. Some of you guys may have recognized elements of it, where it's a kid. The kid's a bit older in the other episode, but it's about a child who's not allowed to sleep. This ghost boy is keeping him up all night long. And it's the same thing. He's just really irritable during the day. He can't sleep. And the parents are asking about the ghost, and they're like, well, why don't you just tell him to let you sleep? And he says, it was really interesting, he goes, the ghost can't sleep. The little boy ghost cannot sleep, so he doesn't want anyone else to sleep either. So it's an intentional thing that the ghost is doing to keep the boy awake. It's almost, crabs in a bucket mentality. If I'm miserable, you're going to be miserable too. And he also said in that story, I'll put that episode in the show notes, but he also said that the ghost boy was afraid. He was afraid because now you're a ghost. You're completely severed from the real world and the afterlife. You're just kind of stuck. And he goes, the ghost boy is afraid, so he wants other people to be afraid as well. Again, he's kind of sharing those emotions that he's feeling. The episode was titled, Why Are Ghosts So Scary? Which had been a question that I'd been asking over the past couple years of the show. Why do they choose to pop up at the scariest moments? Sometimes I think they might do it accidentally because they're so confused. Sometimes they might do it around the time that they died and they're kind of stuck in this moment. But when you get to the point where the ghost is poking you, they're doing it on purpose. Unless the original kid was poked to death. He's like, death by 1,000 pokes. Now he's back. But we had that story. There are some similarities with this one. Now, Cole was posting this online. He goes, I don't really know what to do. My kid's complaining about this ghost. Keeping him up all the time. Can't enjoy the zoo. All sorts of things. So he posted online. He posted it underneath the name. I didn't write his name down. Let me pull it up real quick. But he posted it, and he goes, guys, what should I do? I don't know what to do to help out my son. He's seeing this ghost and all of this stuff. And, he posted it underneath the name Secret Tunnel Collect. That was the name he used. And people gave him some kind of, as far as I'm concerned, goofy ideas. I mean, I guess if it works, it works. But the first one's not goofy. The first one was to sage the house, which is a good way to keep out spirits. However, I think you don't just read a website and go, oh, I can do that, because you are dealing with the mystical. You are dealing with utilizing paranormal powers on your behalf. So, I mean, if you happen to type it into ChatGPT or something like that, or you follow that stupid Google thing that now pops up with the dumb AI answer on the top, I just scroll past that each time because it's beyond unreliable. Read a couple websites before you break out the sage, because you want to make sure you're doing it right. But people are saying you should sage the house. And then other people, parents were saying this, and they go, well, I have this stuff called Ghost Be Gone. Wow, this is awesome. It should be on Shark Tank. You can get rid of ghosts. But it turns out what it is, it's water, just water, mixed with like food coloring or whatever. It's like blue water or pink water, whatever color you want it to be. And you tell your kid, hey, look at Billy, look at this. I have Ghost Be Gone, or Monster Be Gone, or whatever it is. Mummy Be Gone. It's a toy. And you spray it, like, let's say your kid says there's a monster under your bed, and you know for a fact there's not a monster under their bed. You go, well, I went to the store and bought some Monster Be Gone. I'll just spray it under your bed every night, and you don't have to worry about it. And the kid will be like, oh, okay, that's fair enough. He wants a wet floor. He's like, oh, my mushroom collection will soon be complete. I dragged my dad into making my carpet moist. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I would say if it's a fake monster. If you look under your son's bed and you see the boogeyman, he's all coming after you. You're like, you might not want to spray him in the face with blue water. Just saying. I think that actually is a really good trick for people who are afraid of things that aren't real or aren't there, right? Because there could be a monster under someone else's bed, just not yours. Your kid may be afraid of a ghost, but the house isn't actually haunted. Kids can make mistakes. Adults can make mistakes, right? But if you believe that there's actually a ghost in your house, I don't recommend spraying blue water everywhere. Because it's not going to work. It might make the kid feel a little bit better, but that would be the same thing as if there was a crime spree in your town. There's a rash of home invasions, and you're like, well, son, I know that you're real nervous about all those home invasions. I know that every other kid in your classroom has already had someone break into their home and hold them hostage for hours at end. But don't worry, son, because I got this spray bottle. Look at it. It's a golden water. It's called Home Invader Be Gone. At a certain point, you need to invest in bars on your windows, a shotgun or two, and train your children how to defend themselves. At a certain point, you have to take it more seriously than just spraying gold. You're like, that's an extreme example. Of course, people are going to arm themselves and protect their family. But it's an extreme example, but I think you know what I mean. Anyways, in this case, it's a real ghost. I would argue it's a real ghost. This kid's being tormented. So Cole sees this stuff. He reads about Ghost Be Gone. He reads about Sage. And he does say that he did an update to this. He goes, guys, thank you so much for this help. Thank you so much for doing this. He goes, the other day, I did get some sage and some Ghost Be Gone, Ghost Be Gone spray as well. I want to copyright that. I'm going to start selling that. It's going to be made out of Belle Delphine's bathwater, blue food coloring. You have this guy, Cole's walking around with the sage, and he goes, we walked around the house with the sage, and Sam came with me. My 2-year-old son followed me around from room to room as we were saging the rooms. That's so dorky. I don't mean to make fun of kids, right? But I was like, come on, bro. It's kind of lame. No, I get it. He's being tormented by this ghost for months. Maybe he deserves a moment of levity, but apparently Cole was walking around with this sage from room to room, and Sam was following him from room to room, and Sam was dancing the whole time. He's like boogieing down. He's all like, come on, dude. Now you're kind of rubbing it in. If anything, it's going to piss the ghost off. You're doing a victory dance. You're doing like an end zone dance. He's dancing. Sam is dancing from room to room. He might have just been jiggling his little baby belly. I don't know. I just imagine him like doing the moonwalk, doing these intricate moves. He's all flossing on the ghost. He went from room to room, and Sam's dancing around. Cole says apparently this has worked. He said, quote, this is how he kind of wrapped it up. Quote, he hasn't, and refer to Sam, quote, Sam hasn't zoned out or acted weird in any way. Which is interesting because I don't remember him saying he zoned out in the earlier narrative. Maybe I missed that, but that's a little more concerning. He hasn't zoned out or acted weird in any way. He mentions a ghost every now and then, but we talk about it, and I mention the sage we used and how it was a protection spell, and it seems to calm him down, unquote. So based on the evidence that we have here, based on what we have here, if Sam is still seeing the ghost, it's very likely that this saging wasn't done correctly or done completely. Because now at a certain point, he's talking about the ghost, and you could say, well, remember we got that ghost be gone, so how could the ghost be here? If we use Ghost Be Gone, we saved you, Sam. Everything's A-okay. And Sam's like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then he sees the chattering visage of a skeleton ghost in the corner. No. Nothing gets rid of me, Sam. We're together forever. I mean, you can kinda... This term gets thrown around a lot these days, but you can kind of gaslight the kid, right? And being like, no, there are no ghosts. We use this Ghost Be Gone. It's all, you're drinking it. You're like, kids, it's just water. You're all, yep, no ghost in my body. Your soul dies. You're like, it works. The kid, if he still sees a ghost, and you're like, well, there are no ghosts because we saged it and we sprayed this stuff everywhere. The kid's like, yeah, I guess. Like, I do trust my dad. But on the other hand, he sees this blood-soaked ghoul standing in the corner. You might be able to work it out that way. But if the kid's still seeing the ghost, I think you might want to turn more away from the internet and more towards, like, experts on this, spiritual experts. The problem is that obviously when you post anything like this online, people will be like, is your carbon monoxide detector working? Like, is it possible your kid, and only your kid, no one else is being affected by this, is suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning? So... you have that. And now, I'm not against saging. I just think you should make sure you're doing it right. Don't grok it or chat GPT it. Look into a couple different websites and compare and contrast and figure out how you're going to do it. I also don't think, though, like, if the ghost is still there, the ghost is still there. And you can say, well, no, we used that Ghost Be Gone. But you didn't. That didn't work. You can't keep leaning on that. You know that's fake. But the other thing I thought was interesting about this narrative, I'm not just telling the story so I can make fun of a 2-year-old dancing, because I do feel bad for Sam. He is kind of stuck in this situation. What I found interesting about this narrative is that Cole, the father, and I'm not throwing him under the bus. I read accounts like this from time to time, and I can 100% see a lot of people doing this. Cole seemed very, very intrigued at the idea of a ghost in the house. To the point where earlier in the narrative, it seemed like he was pushing. Once that Sam started talking about a ghost, he wanted more details about it. Cole's like, well, is it a good ghost or is it a bad ghost? Is it a boy or a girl? It seemed that, maybe I'm getting the wrong impression out of this, but it seemed like he was kind of excited by the fact that the house was haunted. And here's the thing, in a vacuum, that's totally fine. If it's you or other rational adults who are going ghost hunting or in a house and they think the house is haunted, they go over to their friend's house, the friend goes, there's some weird stuff going on. That's one thing. It's one thing to go, oh, that's really cool, your house is haunted? Well, can I come over? Can I hang out? And they're like, yeah, sure. But when a kid's involved, you know what I mean? Like, you can't really be excited about it. It'd be the same thing as if you had a pet boa constrictor, and it was your favorite pet in the world, and then you married and you had a baby. Right now, I mean, I guess boa constrictors are kind of cool. I guess it's not my cup of tea. But at a certain point, you got to put away the boa constrictor and put away all of your boa constrictor affiliated things. I don't know what else there would be. A giant boa constrictor and a couple eggs, boa eggs. I think at a certain point, you kind of got to go, okay, yeah, let's not take this so exciting. My kid's seeing a ghost. Let's just get rid of it. But again, now maybe I just read it wrong, but it did seem like Cole in the beginning seemed pretty stoked by the fact that there's ghosts. While his son, and I think eventually he does start taking it a little more seriously because his son is starting to suffer like physiological effects from this. He can't sleep. He's getting irritable. But yeah, I do see that happen in a lot of these stories. A lot of these stories where the parents or someone else is like, ooh, a ghost? Let's try to contact it. Which again is totally fine in a vacuum, but when there's people in the scenario in the house that can't remove themselves from it, you know, you're not dealing with it. He can't eat. He can't eat. There's something underneath his high chair, which is absolutely terrifying. He can't remove himself from the situation. So it does seem like Cole later on does take it more seriously. I would probably double check to make sure that this saging, this protection ritual that you did actually worked. And sometimes they fade out too. It's more similar to a bug bombing your house than it is to buying a deadbolt. Like, especially if the spirit really wants to be there, if there's some sort of draw of paranormal force, it's not like you sage the house once and it's done. It can fade away over time. So you want to keep an eye on that. If you happen to be listening to this episode, you're like, dude, you made fun of my kid dancing, man. I'm not paying attention to anything else you're doing. Colin, Sills, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous Carpenter copter. We are leaving behind this house. Why don't you fly us all the way out to jolly old England, mate? Colin's flying us all the way out to jolly old England. This story, again, we don't have an exact time of when this took place. We do know that the person telling the story now is a grandma. So we probably figure 50 years in the past, 60 years in the past, somewhere around there. We're in England, and we're in a pretty normal neighborhood. I would consider it normal, because I've lived in some pretty rough neighborhoods. But to Becky, that's who we'll give the name of this grandmother. When she was 8 years old, she goes, my parents, we moved into kind of a rundown neighborhood in England. Things were getting a little tight, finances are getting a little tight, so we moved into a not super nice neighborhood, and the house next to ours was vacant. And it was vacant for a while. Becky's there, and she's hanging out with her older brother, Scott, who I imagine is like 10, because we'll get to some context clues later in the story. He's not like super older. Becky and Scott would be hanging out, and the kids in the neighborhood, they'd be like, "Oi, mate, oi, welcome to the neighborhood." And Becky would go, "Oh, yeah, this place seems kind of nice." She's all lying. All the houses are run down. "Yeah, really nice neighborhood." "Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. Thank you, mate. Thank you." "Oi, you see that house next to yours? I seen it with me own peepers, I did. That house is haunted." Becky's like, "Really? That house is haunted?" And another kid's like, "Oh, yeah, it is. It's haunted. It be haunted." And Scott and Becky are like, listen, here's the thing. Like that first story, right? Ghosts are cool when you can kind of show up when you want to and leave when you want to. But now they're living next door to a haunted house. And a lot of kids believe that. No one had lived there for a long time. In fact, the most recent residence was a family of squatters had moved in. They were there for a while, just squatting around. Couple weeks at most, when all of a sudden they just moved out in a hurry. And everyone in the neighborhood realized that. And again, people in the neighborhood know the reputation of this house that it's haunted. So when some squatters broke in, they didn't have to worry calling the cops. They're like, "Oi, they'll be out of there soon." And sure enough, they were. The house just, no one wanted to live in it for any period of time. Not even people who need a place to live. Not even homeless people who are trying to find somewhere to squat. Well, one day, Scott walks up to Becky and he goes, "Hey, Becky, I got an idea. Let's go next door. Let's go check out that house." "I don't know, Scott." "No, Becky, come on, it'll be totally awesome. Everyone says it's haunted. It might be haunted. Maybe we're not. But we'll be the brave ones. We'll get to look around. Maybe there'll be some cool stuff in there." Not a lot of stuff to do, right? Becky, 50, 60 years ago, right? She's a grandma now, so what else is there to do? Yeah, sure, let's go. So they go over to the house. Oh, man, look at all this stuff. There's doors? What? Their house is even more run down than the vacant house. They're like, what's this stuff? Wallpaper? Wow. They're all looking around. They're exploring the house. Now, Scott would, this is why I think he's only 10 years old and not like 18. He would bring his toys with him. He'd always be like carrying like a fire truck, or probably not a teddy bear. That's a little too young. But you know what I mean? Like, how kids will sometimes carry their toys with them. They're doing this whole urban exploring thing, but they're both kids. They're just kind of looking at rooms being like, wow, this is crazy. That's a 2-story house. They go up to the 2nd floor. And one of the rooms that kind of catches Becky's attention, and it was really just like every other room in the house, but there was something off about this room. The energy, something was wrong. And Scott realized it too. When Becky and Scott both kind of were looking around in the room, they just could feel, they were there for a few moments, something was wrong with this room. This room did look like every other room. This room, though, had a very interesting design on it. The wallpaper on the walls was yellowed. And on the wallpaper were these vertical lines that were made to look like leaves and vines. And sitting on these vines, she said there had to have been dozens, if not 100 of these things, were birds. Illustrations of birds on the wallpaper sitting on these vines. She goes, they were either doves or pigeons. I really couldn't tell. But you walk in, it's basically all this wallpaper of all these birds and these vines and stuff like that. Now, it should be completely just a room like any other room, but again, the energy was off. Something felt wrong in this room. And they left. They left the room and they just kind of continued walking around the house and eventually made their way back home. They leave the house and they go back home, and when the parents find out that they're over at the house, both of them get really, really mad at Becky and Scott. They go, guys, that house has been abandoned for God knows how long, abandoned long enough for people to think there's ghosts in there. You guys can't go over there, it's dangerous. Like, forget all the ghost stories. For all you know, the stairs are rotted out. You could fall through the floorboards on the 2nd floor. Like, just don't go over there. It's super dangerous. They got in trouble for that. Well, a few days after they had visited the house, Scott and Becky were walking home from school. And as they were nearing their home, they hear a... They hear the sound. If you recognize that sound, that wasn't the sound of a 47-year-old man barely able to breathe. No. They're walking home and they hear this fluttering sound. Becky and Scott look up, and that 2nd-story window of that 2nd-story room with the yellowed wallpaper, that window is opened wide. Out of that window comes flying hundreds of birds. That was Becky's estimate. It was more than you could count. Birds rushing out of this 2nd-story bedroom. Becky and Scott looked at these birds fly off into the air. Birds they could only identify as either doves or pigeons. So white birds, basically. What would you think in that moment? We're not done yet, but I mean, you see just that alone. hundreds of birds flying out of a house, even if it was dozens, even if she got the number a little exaggerated, dozens of birds flying out of this house, what are you going to do? You'd have to go back and look to see what that was. Now, the most likely answer was a bunch of birds had nested in there. But it was so odd that they seemed to be coming out of that same room that had the drawing. No, it couldn't be that crazy. It's not like the drawings on the room. Like, are you thinking that the birds came out of the wallpaper? I don't even know if that's what Becky and Scott were thinking at the time. But it was unusual enough. It was unusual enough what was going on. So the next day, they made the decision. They're going to go back to that house and they're going to see where all those birds came from. It's not like they came off the wallpaper. That's just ridiculous. But they did come out of that same room, so is there like a big nest in there? Like if we go in there and find some nests, then we'll know. Becky and Scott go next door. They go back into this house. They go up to the second floor. They cannot find that room. Not that they couldn't find the room with the wallpaper and all the drawings of the birds were gone off the wallpaper, which would be heart attack inducing enough, right? They couldn't even find that room. They couldn't find a room with the yellowed wallpaper. They couldn't find the room with the wallpaper with the birds on it. They couldn't even find the room that felt off. They couldn't find the room. Because that really would be the if you went to the room and you saw that it had the yellowed wallpaper with the vines and no birds on it, then in a sense your questions are answered, but now you have even more questions. If you went and you found the room and you saw the yellowed wallpaper with the vines and the birds still on it, then you would still say, well, we found this room. Birds must have been nesting in here and we didn't know that. They made a nest after we left and they left it. They made a nest after that day we visited and so on and so forth. They couldn't find the room at all. They couldn't find the room with the wallpaper or with the wallpaper with the birds gone. They couldn't find the room that was off. They looked all over and they could not find that same room. Now you have an even bigger issue. I've been missing birds on a wallpaper is bad enough. Missing an entire room. They decide to leave. Now Scott, in his little boy brain, just like he always does, he brought his toy truck with him. When they went over to the house to check on this room and they couldn't find that he had his toy truck on him. But as they were leaving the house, Scott goes, "Where's my toy truck? Where did I put it?" And he's checking his pockets. He can't find it. He doesn't know where it's at. And Becky's like, "Where'd you put it?" And he goes, "Oh, I think I left it in the house. I'm going to go get it. I'm going to go grab my truck real quick, Becky. Hold on." Scott runs back into the house by himself. A couple minutes later, he comes walking out. And Becky noticed that her brother looked pale. Something was off. Something was wrong. "Did you find the toy truck? Did you find your truck?" Becky asked. And Scott just nodded. Doesn't say anything. He just nods. And they walk back home. Later that same evening, Becky's hanging out with Scott. Becky realizes that he doesn't have his toy truck. She hasn't seen it the rest of the day. And so it kind of struck her as odd because he really likes the truck. And she goes, "Hey, Scott, I know you went to the house to go get your truck. Where's your truck at?" And Scott says, "It's in the house. It's in the house next door." Becky's like, "What? I thought you went back in to go. Why did you leave it in the house? Why did you leave it there?" Scott's just sitting there and he goes, "It's upstairs on the wall." What? Becky asks. Scott says it's on the wall. Don't know how to explain it. I found my truck, but it's on the wall. Becky keeps saying, what does that mean? What do you mean it's on the wall? What do you mean? And Scott kept kind of saying the same thing over again. He didn't know how to explain what it was. He could only say it's on the wall. It's on the wall. Like, how else am I supposed to say that? It's mind-bending. It's on the wall. And Becky keeps asking, and Scott eventually just gets upset and starts getting really angry and goes, I don't know how else I can tell you this. I found my truck, but it's on the wall. It's painted on the wall, Becky. It's on the wall. And Becky keeps asking, because again, here's the thing. We know this is a paranormal story we're investigating years and years later, decades later. But in this case, Becky's just, it doesn't make sense. What do you mean? How can something be on the wall? Eventually, Scott said, listen, quit asking me. It's really, really making me mad. I can't explain it. I'm trying to explain it to you. I can barely think of it myself. Just leave it. I found this story in the archives of paranormal.about.com. Paranormal.about.com is still around. It's this collection of these paranormal stories, but for whatever reason, so many of their articles are now, we have to use the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive to access them. I think I found out about this particular site and using the Internet Archive to get them. I think I found out it because I was researching something on Sustained Disgust's Conspiracy Theory Iceberg, or Obscure Mystery Iceberg is what I think he calls it as. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a fantastic resource. But so is this website. It's always so puzzling to me when you have years and years of paranormal stories and they just kind of disappear. It really sucks. It really, really does. There's a paranormal researcher named Stephen Wagner, who, as far as I can tell, is still in operation. He's written books and he's posting on the new paranormal.about.com. But imagine if all of a sudden just your life work just disappeared. All of these stories, all of these accounts. This particular account was written by someone named Mary C., the granddaughter of Becky. She's the one who sent this to Stephen Wagner, or Stephen Wagner found it and posted it to paranormal.about.com. And it's interesting because here's the thing. This story sounds completely unbelievable. In the world of the paranormal, anything's possible. I want it to be possible. I want this one to be possible. And Mary, for her credit, she goes, listen, my grandma was never for sure that her brother was telling the truth about the truck, that the truck ended up on the wallpaper, that it ended up painted to the wall. At a certain point, she just stopped asking him about it. They did end up moving out of the area at a certain point. They never went back to the house. He never had his truck again. And Mary said that, I can read the exact quote that she ended this with. She goes, whether he, meaning the brother, Scott, whether he, Scott, was telling the truth or not, she, Becky, wasn't sure, but it seemed like he had been. They never returned to the old house and eventually moved out. My grandmother told me this story when I was younger. And she says my grandma was not a frivolous person. She wasn't one for flights of fancy. Very down-to-earth and intelligent. That's how Mary described her grandma. And those are things that we look for in this field. Because really a lot of these stories, most of the stories we cover on this podcast, most of the stories you hear personally, a friend tells them, whatever, it's a single event that cannot be replicated, or it's sometimes just a single witness. And that's just the nature of the game when we're looking at the world of the paranormal. But sometimes we can look at stuff like this person had a totally normal life. They weren't constantly telling stories about things that seem like one in a million or seem like something out of the Twilight Zone. To have your grandmother, who you've known all your life. Mary sees growing up with this grandma, and then every other facet. Grandma is smart and not making stuff up, and you can trust her. And then she tells you this story. It does add some credence to it. It really does. As much credence as you can get with it. And even then, the grandma was like, I could never prove that my brother made it up, but I also couldn't prove that he didn't make it up. I never saw the truck again. We ended up moving out of the area. As far as paranormal stories go, this is one in a million. It truly is a Twilight Zone level story. And I hope it's real. I kind of have mixed feelings about it, honestly. We'll wrap it up like this. I hope it's real in the sense because it is so bizarre. And it adds an unusual layer to an already weird world. Of all the ghosts and cryptids and UFOs, spiritual battles, portals to other dimensions, shifting realities in front of our eyes, those are all fantastic. I'm not knocking any of those. But then you have stuff like this. Like right when you think you can categorize a bunch of things, you have a house with freezing, what would you even call this? Wallpaper that sucks that wallpaper that absorbs things and traps them there? Because that's kind of what it's implying, that you had this room where the birds were stuck on the wall, and then one day they were released for whatever reason. And then you had the truck stuck on the wall. You have to wonder, and it's even more than that. It's even more than that when you think about it. That's already bizarre enough. Let's not skip past that. It's wallpaper that absorbs matter from our world. In theory, right? We only have two. They only saw the birds on the wall, and then birds flying out of the room, and then we have this truck appearing on the wall. What other things were absorbed over this time? What other things were going on? That's one thing, right? That's already weird enough. The other one is, remember when they went back in the house to check after all the birds flew away? They couldn't find the room. That in and of itself is paranormal. We've covered stories like that before on the podcast. I'll see if I can try to find them. They're kind of hard. Just like a shifting room. We covered that story about that family exploring that abandoned house in the middle of nowhere, and they saw a door leading down to the basement, and then they saw a staircase going upstairs, and they said, well, they already kind of just urban explored the first floor. They said, let's go upstairs, look around, and then we'll go down to the basement. And they went upstairs, and they looked around, and they go, it's graffiti and creaky floorboards and all sorts of stuff, and they're just having fun. They're doing a little urban exploring. They said, well, let's go check out the basement. When they got down to the first floor, they couldn't find the basement. Like the door that they all saw and the staircase they all saw leading down. When they came downstairs and they go, we looked all over the first floor of that house. We all saw an entry to the basement, but now that we were going to go down it, we could not find the basement door. We could not find the staircase leading down, even though we all saw it earlier. Paranormal. Dodged a bullet, really. Because if they had gone down there and that portal had shut, that door had shifted to another reality, or whatever is going on, whatever the mechanics of these houses, we don't know. But I go, what if they had went down to the basement first? They would have just been a mystery. A family goes missing in the woods. A lot of people would consider it a true crime story. Maybe a few would consider it a paranormal missing 411 type story, but no one would ever know the truth. It's such a subset of the world of the paranormal. Houses shifting through realities. And then on top of this, the wallpaper. The yellowed wallpaper with the birds and then the birds flying over. Fascinating stuff. Hopefully it's not so fascinating that it's a made-up story that's found its way into the paranormal lore, because it does happen from time to time, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to judge sometimes. This story, the thing is, it's so fantastical. If this was a story about aliens abducting someone and then dropping them off a couple hours later, but to the person it only felt like it was 10 minutes and da-da-da-da. We're so used to hearing that story that we wouldn't go, well, this is too crazy. It can't be true. It actually As far as alien abductions go, it's pretty boring. And it's very interesting when we look at it that way. This story's so fantastical because we've never heard it before. We've seen it in spooky movies or creepy short stories. But in real life, it sounds so fantastical, you wonder, is it true? And we have those questions, but for Becky and Scott, they know what they saw. They know what they experienced. But more importantly, they know what they didn't see. When they went back upstairs, they could not find that room. There was no sign of it. No sign of the wallpaper. No sign of the birds. No sign of that room even existing the second time they arrived. We may look at the story and think it's pretty far-fetched, but to two kids in England, it's part of their truth. It's part of their life story. We may debate whether or not it's real, but to them, they'll never forget the room with the wallpaper. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be your email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one.